All right, hello everybody. How we doing? It's been a long day. Great day, but a long day. You've hung in there. The good news is I'm the last one. The bad news for me is that I am the only person standing between all of you and happy hour. So I will try to respect the time limits here. Before we start, I'm going to ask you to help me with two things. The first of which is, because if it isn't on social media, it didn't happen, I'm going to ask you to be in my selfie. So please, crowd in. Here we go. All right. Digamos, pura vida. Thank you very much. All right. The second thing I want to ask you to help me with is I want to ask you to help me give a big round of applause and thank you to Arnoldo, Noelia, Liere, the entire Sinter Cafe team for this extraordinary event. I've been coming a very short time, but I've been so impressed with the content, the networking opportunities, the quality of execution. I'm honored to be part of the event, so thank you for having me. You probably expect that the person coming in representation of CQI, which created the Q, will talk about the Q and quality, and you are correct. But I also want to talk about two letters that are adjacent to Q in the alphabet, P for price and R for resilience. The idea for this presentation really was born in February with a post that I published on the CQI blog reflecting on the current state of sea market prices and the implication for quality and the sector. Noelia read the article and thought it would be a good idea to have me here to reflect on that in a little more depth and on the basis of observing what actually happened between February and November in terms of the things that I was worried about. And if you were here this morning, you heard Scott Clemens talk about how the title of his talk came about, and mine was pretty similar. Noelia was asking me for a title, and she said, well, it's about price and quality and resilience and navigating market cycles. I said, perfect. So that's the title of the talk. It won't resemble exactly what you heard in the presentation, but I hope that's okay. So I'm going to draw over the next few minutes on experiences and insights I've gained through more than 20 years of coffee in three roles. I think I often say that I've spent my career at the intersection of coffee quality and international development. And I think that's definitely been true in all three of the roles that I've had in coffee. I started in 2004 with Catholic Relief Services. I spent about 12 and a half years running projects, living mostly in Central and South America. And then I moved to Chicago, where I live now, to be the director of sourcing at Intelligentsia Coffee. And in both of those roles, I really spent, when I was doing my job well, I spent most of my time thinking about how I could use my work to create less risk and more opportunity for producers. It was different in the two roles, one for running projects and the other buying coffee, but it was the same way. I came to see coffee, this is a spoiler alert, I came to see quality as developmental. And so when the opportunity came a little less than 2 years ago to join CQI, it was a no-brainer. So I've been at CQI for a little less than 2 years. But that's enough about me. I want to hear about you. So in these events, when someone is looking at their phone, it's usually a bad idea. It's a bad sign for the presentation. But I want to hear a little bit about you, starting with, I'm going to need a little help with you to press that little blue button in the middle of the screen. So if you can scan this code or go to menti.com and enter that 8-digit code, with a little bit of help from the stage, we can get that blue button pressed. I've done this a few times and haven't seen this, so. Can you guys click that? I can't. No? Okay. Well, I look forward to hearing more about you when you are, there we go. You're doing it yourselves. Wonderful. I was going to ask where you're from. I know I know where a lot of you are from. I'm trying to get a sense of who's in the room and what you do in coffee. Here, I'm getting a sense of how long folks have been in coffee, so it's a good mix. Definitely a lot of folks like me with maybe some gray hair who have been around a while and have a long lens on this stuff, which is wonderful. The last question is the most scientific, and it looks like this one will work. I'd love to get your perspectives on, this one was really fun. Oh, well. Sorry about that. We'll get that worked out for the next time. So I want to talk about what's been happening over the last year with prices and the implications for quality and the future of quality ecosystem. But I want to take a little bit longer lens and start the conversation where I started my career in coffee back in 2004. And I want to talk about three things that happened in 2004 that are really kind of important to understand the current moment from my perspective. And the first one, those of you who are at 20 years plus will remember living through this, was called at the time simply the coffee crisis, the time of more than 1,000 days consecutively when the C market closed at less than $1 a pound. It was a very difficult time for coffee, a real challenge to the resilience of the entire system. But we don't really have I guess silver lining is in a dark cloud is the English translation. I think, no hay mal que por bien no venga. The good thing from that period was that it really was the thing that really put the turbocharged fair trade in the U.S. market. It became a way, the dominant mode for smallholder farmers, especially in this part of the world, to build more resilience into their operations. It's only a slight exaggeration to say that it was the difference between life and death for a lot of growers, and certainly was the difference between staying in coffee and abandoning coffee altogether. And that's how I got my start in coffee, working for CRS, leading a fair trade coffee program. It's the first really major, in the last 25 years, it's the first really major effort to address pricing as a way to build the resilience of the system. But there's something else happening in 2004, and that is the Panama Cup of Excellence, which is the event that introduced or reintroduced geisha to the world and changed the coffee sector forever, or at least until today. Because it helped us understand that, like wine, coffee varieties matter, and not all coffee varieties are created equal in terms of flavor. And it set off a period of 20 years of varietal diversification as a strategy for growers to become more resilient, to bring, instead of a single blended product, multiple products to market with multiple flavor profiles, in many cases to command price premiums, and to build more resilient systems. And I think this is a watershed moment in the modern history of coffee, and I don't think coffee will ever be the same because of the thing that auction helped us to realize. So Susie and Erwin, who are in the room, this is one of the enormous contributions. I think they did a great job of talking about all the great things that COE does. But this event really changed coffee in a way that has had lasting impact. And the third thing that happened in 2004, of course, was the launch of the Q. We introduced the Q, which was part of a generational commitment to create a common language of coffee quality. And this systematization of quality really helped to underpin the system and build more resilient systems. So we're all speaking the same language, all being able to refer to quality and understand within some parameters what we're talking about to build a more resilient kind of system. My own career in coffee, the 12 years I ran projects at CRS, there was always some work in the fair trade space, supporting fair trade, but very quickly I came to embrace quality as the best strategy for smallholder farmers, for all farmers, but for smallholder farmers in particular who are not going to compete on volume and scale with Brazil or larger farmers operating with economies of scale. The quality was the differentiator, and it was the best strategy to hedge risk and seize reward in the marketplace. And I've always found myself wishing that Levi Strauss & Company were a coffee roaster, because that's the best slogan for coffee that I could imagine. Quality never goes out of style. So to jump ahead a little to 2011, at this time I'm living in Guatemala City, running a 4-country coffee project for CRS in Mexico and Central America. And I'm 53. I sometimes don't remember what happened last week. I've been going to coffee shows like this for 20 years, but I remember very well one line that I heard in one presentation at one coffee show in April of 2011, and it was the RICO Symposium in Portland, Oregon, when the speaker said, "A good relationship is a natural hedge." And I've never forgotten that because everything that I have experienced in my career tells me that is true. And it really resonated with me because it was happening against the backdrop of me watching that play itself out in real time in El Salvador. So this is what's happening around then. We'll get to 2024, and this time, last year, when the market went up above $3 for the first time in 15 years, and the last time it did it was in 2011. Those of you who are 10 years or 15 years or more in coffee will remember this. For 2 days, the market closed over $3 a pound, and it was a big deal. And at the time, I was working with a group in El Salvador, looking at those two things I was talking about in the 2004, right? Fair trade and quality-based differentiation as ways to command price premiums and build a little bit more resiliency into that farming system. And this organization had never met a buyer, any international buyer, any roaster. We managed to connect them to a roaster that was focused on fair trade and quality. And in August, September of that year, they fixed a contract. I think it was $1.70 a pound. And the cooperative was thrilled. I mean, it was like a major moment in the history of the co-op. And then you can see what happened between the time they fixed the price and collected the coffee. The market rallied. And I think that line on the right is a little bit off. If I remember, it was right around $2.70 a pound at the time that the co-op reapproached the roaster to talk about the possibility of renegotiating it. They hadn't yet collected all the coffee. They were worried they weren't going to be able to in a high-priced environment. And the roaster renegotiated the contract at the C rate of the day. It was an extraordinary moment, and it helped me to understand that, yeah, it's a reflection of that roaster and the power of relationships. But it's also, in my experience, it's something structural about quality. That quality aligns people's interests along the supply stream in ways that the commodity-based approach doesn't. Because this roaster had invested time and energy in going through the queue with this cooperative, cupping with them, trying to align their understanding of quality, bringing them to a point where they could get a container worth of approval. And they made the calculation that we're playing a long game. And for us, we want this relationship to be not a year or 2 years, but 5 or 10 years. And not this first container we're buying, but 2 containers, and then 4, and then 8. And they took the long view. And the relationships helped to carry the day. And the future of that cooperative could have been very different based on how they responded to that. I love that about quality. And at this time, I was working with CIAT, the International Center for Tropical Agriculture in Colombia. And one of our partners there, who was focusing a lot on quality and the opportunities it created in the market, talked about the paradigm shift that quality creates. He said the old system, the commodity system, was about making money off of your partners. But the new system, based on quality, is about making money together with your partners. And you're competing against other supply streams. I think this is a great example of that that I saw play out in real time. We're going to go back to the time machine. We're going to jump ahead again to 2020. At this point, I'm living in Chicago, working at Intelligentsia, and COVID hits, and we all get grounded. I'm not doing any traveling. None of the buyers are traveling. And it's more than 2 years before I get back on the road. And in the middle of 2022, I take 2 trips consecutively, one to Peru and one to Colombia. And I felt like Rip Van Winkle, who in the story falls asleep for 20 years and wakes up to a world he doesn't recognize. Because 2 years had passed, but it felt like 20. I was seeing stuff that I didn't recognize. While I was sleeping, the processing revolution happened. And I remember very well being in Peru with a supplier who, you may know that Intelligentsia pretty famously for a long time was vocally opposed to naturals and anything that wasn't a pristine, crisp, washed process. And we had a partner in Peru who shared that preference. And he was frustrated because in 2022, when I went to see him, he said, look, I'm not talking about this stuff. I'm not promoting it. I don't want it. But people have cell phones, and they go on YouTube, and they see anaerobic fermentation, and they see infusions, and they're trying things out on their farm, and they're just bringing me these coffees. And so I think it is a time of incredible innovation in the post-harvest processing space. You all know that. For me, I think it's probably processing hasn't been this important in coffee since the 19th century in the advent of the washed process. So it's a moment, right? Processing is having a moment. I put it at 2020 because of that anecdote from Peru, but it's been building, right? This is a photo that I love. You can see there it's dated 2018. This is a producer who we were sourcing from at Intelligentsia in southern Mexico. It's called Finca Chelín, and we referred to the owner as kind of the mad professor of coffee. This is a hydro-natural, and so this is unique. You heard Erwin talking earlier about all the different post-harvest processes that he's seen. I've never seen this one before. The hydro-natural begins its life as a natural, spends a couple of days lounging on a tarp like that on a patio, and then it's introduced to a cold water bath. And then it is a moment of triage. And from that point, it can become a natural, which is the hydro-natural you're seeing. It can become a hydro-natural honey, or a hydro-natural washed. Totally crazy. And as we're talking about it, I told the grower about the U.S. Ice cream brand, Baskin-Robbins, whose claim to fame was that it had 31 flavors. And I said, I think you might have 31 post-harvest processes. And we mapped them out. It turned out he only had 24 in 2018. But the point that I'm trying to make is that this is the same impulse that we saw get awakened in 2004 with the Cup of Excellence in varietal diversification. Varietal diversification allows you to bring, if you have 6 varieties, you have at least 6 different products you bring to market. If you refract the flavors of those genetics through the lenses of different post-harvest processing, you multiply the products you bring to market. So this producer had, at the time of this photo, 24 post-harvest processes. He had about six varieties in meaningful production. So he could have brought hundreds of different products technically to the market. And I'm bringing it up because it's what you all know, that processing is an important part of this strategy of how to improve quality, command price premiums, and build more resilient household level and enterprise level economies. So finally, I'm getting to 2024. It was just around this time last year when the market was creeping up toward that $3 mark. And this is the historic run. You all know this because probably you're refreshing your phones right now to look at where the market is. But before last October or last November, the market in my lifetime had cleared $3 on 3 different days. 3 days. And there have been, most days in 2020, since in the last year, it hasn't been under $3 at all. And it's spent a lot of time above $4 where it's living right now, which you all know very well. And the question is, what does it mean for quality? And this was really what I was reflecting on in the blog post. For me, it makes me worry because I feel like it completely inverts the incentive structure that I'm familiar with from my own work in quality, which is basically an upward sloping line and a positive relationship between price and quality. The higher the quality, the higher the price. It's a very rough estimation, but at its core, it's right. And it's what I told producers and worked to deliver to producers working in projects for CRS in Central and South America. It's what we told producers at Intelligentsia and worked to deliver on that to reward their efforts to produce a higher quality. And at CQI, our mission is to improve the quality of coffee in the lives of the people who produce it. There's 2 parts of that mission. And how are they connected? They're connected by the market. Finding people who are going to pay higher prices for higher quality coffee or deliver more value. It doesn't have to just be price. It could be more volume. It could be multi-grade purchases. It could be multi-year commitments. Creating more value through hedging risk or providing more reward. This is my understanding, my experience through 20 years of the relationship between price and quality. But it works. It really, really works when the C market is low. It's kind of like fair trade in that way. The greatest value proposition for quality incentives is when the market is low, because people are willing to work for that extra premium. And it gets challenging when the C market is high. In my mind, it inverts quality because it sets the price first. You're getting the price independent of your quality. So what's the incentive to do the extra work, to do the separation, to do the long processing? Really on the bottom it says quality. On the x-axis it should be effort. It's effort, the effort required to produce quality. I didn't know Jeff Watts was here. from Intelligentsia. Jeff used to say that the most important variable for producers to produce quality is wanting to produce quality. And I wouldn't have thought of that if I didn't see you there, but that's what I'm trying to get at here. It's harder for producers to want to produce quality if the market is going to pay them if they don't. So this idea in the subhead there, high prices are the enemy of quality, for me this has been an article of faith that's sort of played itself out in my experience. The question is, are they? Are they, right? What does this year's experience tell us? And you all have a point of view on this because you're buying coffee, you're selling coffee, you're tasting coffee, you're trading coffee. These are based on conversations that we have with our network, which, as I think you know, Q graders are shot through the DNA of the industry. They're everywhere. And we're talking to Q graders and allies in the roasting community. And there seem to be enough anecdotal data points, I think we now call that anecdata, to suggest that, yeah, the high C price has had a deleterious effect on quality. We've seen reports of poor harvesting practices, samples getting lower scores overall and being just meh, less attributes. Companies that are looking for, that really build their brand on quality and are looking for single origin coffees, having a harder and harder time finding them, approving them. They're bringing fewer and fewer single origins to market. And this one, moisture levels between 13 and 14% from suppliers who had been providing coffees for years at 11 and 11.5%. Companies that are committed to working with suppliers to produce quality and to process with quality, jumping from 11 to 13.5%. This is not 150-hour fermentation. This is not a Mosto anaerobic. This is not an infused coffee. This is just basic processing, and it's breaking down. This is a little bit stylized, so the red line, which charts price, are the real data. The black one I drew by hand based on a conversation with a roaster, so it's not scientific, but it reflects, if this were a movie, they would say inspired by true events. As the market crept up, this roaster saw its rejection rate creep up from 6 to 20%, which is massive. We've been talking to people talking about a single rejection or being a $500,000 event in this market. That's a big deal. And it's not coincidental that it just lagged behind the rise of the C market. The higher the price goes, the less people are willing to work on quality and the more rejections they were getting. You can see they worked over time to remediate that and get the rejection level back to pre-rally levels, but not all the relationships survived. And for me, that was the nightmare scenario that inspired the blog post to begin with. You know, high prices can put quality at risk for the reasons that I'm talking about, the incentive for effort. But for me, more concerning is that they spell trouble for commitment to trading relationships based on mutual commitment to quality. That's how we all got here. Everybody in this room who's been here for 20 years, or whether you've been here for 10 or 20 or 5 or 2, I think you get this. These relationships that we come to places like this to build are in jeopardy, and they're not all surviving this moment. These responses are fundamental, I think, to the future of the industry. When I worked in the international development space, we talked about negative coping strategies, which not that deep, right? You get it. It's when you make decisions to optimize your outcomes today that affect negatively your ability to generate positive outcomes in the future. And there's nothing worse than breaking relationships that you've spent 10, 5, 10, 15, 20 years building in response to volatility. This volatility, we all face it. Regardless of where we sit in the chain, it creates different risks for all of us. And we need to find a way to navigate it without breaking the relationships that we've built to get to where we are and to build the industry that we've built together. I guess I want to end on this this note, revisiting the R for relationships. It's kind of a nice bookend. The roaster in 2011 who renegotiated a contract from 170 to 270 to let the producers supplying his coffee participate in that market rally, told me that late last year, a little after this date, I think, he got a call from a supplier in South America who had 4 containers of coffee that they had collected and paid for before the market rally. And they offered it to this buyer at the price they paid as part of a relationship and a commitment built over many years of that buyer doing the same thing for them. And he said it made them whole, and it got them through that one gesture. So it was kind of this beautiful karmic moment, but it also is, for me, just another reminder of the way relationships are something that we can draw on in this moment to help get us through a difficult time. Where is CQI in all of this? Just a last thought. As I mentioned, as you saw on the earlier slide, and you probably know, CQI has licensed the Q to SCA. The moment of transition was just over a month ago. So now CQI is working exclusively in the area of post-harvest processing. We've been doing that since 2017. It's kind of our best-kept secret. It's mostly lived in the shadow of the Q, but processing is having a moment, and we need to invest in processing as an industry, not just to make sure that all of that experimentation is based on good science, but to make sure that we don't have 13% moisture levels in our coffee, and we're doing the basics right? We have to learn the recipes before we improvise. We're putting in place plans to massively expand participation in this program, but we're also, in this moment, looking around and talking to people. We've put out surveys, we're interviewing stakeholders throughout the supply stream about pain points in quality. And in this moment in the market, it's a long list. These are just a few that I fired off from more recent conversations that we've had, but there's a lot of work to be done. CQI is going to find ways to push out from our current focus on post-harvest processing to help people in this room address some of these challenges to quality, because quality never goes out of style. I believe that in 20 years, it's been validated in every step of my career. And I think we need to build better and stronger and more resilient quality systems, because this quality system did not get through this moment unscathed, and we're still in this moment. There's no telling where it's going to end. We need to build stronger quality systems together. CQI, at the beginning of next year, will celebrate its 30th anniversary. I see 30 years of work here on this slide, and I really look forward to doing it together with people in this room. So thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.